going back to our series AIM, looking at the letter of First Timothy. Last time we looked at our brokenness and sinfulness and how that helps us understand the depth of God's love for us as He turns us from sinners into servants. Today we're going to look at what Paul calls Jesus' perfect patience. And let's start here looking at verse 16. Paul says, "But I received mercy for this reason, that in me, as the foremost, Jesus Christ might display his perfect patience as an example to those who were to believe in him for eternal life." He talks about Jesus' perfect patience. Remember, Paul referred to himself as the foremost sinner, that he saw himself as somebody who could not stop sinning. And yet, Jesus demonstrates this patience with him. Think about what patience means. Jesus was hurt by Paul's sin. The mission of Christ was hindered because of Paul's sin. And yet, Jesus took all of this stuff on himself and waited with incredible patience. What Paul says, perfect patience. And in that, that patience that Jesus showed, he also demonstrated mercy towards Paul. You know, God in his power could have struck Paul down. And yet in his perfect patience, he revealed to him his goodness and the truth and love that's displayed in the gospel of Jesus and his death and resurrection. And so we can get a sense of what this is like. Have you ever thought about how Jesus is patient with you? When we shift attention from our shame and instead actually focus on God's patience, then we get our attention off of ourselves, and it relieves that burden of shame that we can feel from our sinfulness. This is where Paul's at here. And yet it's not just dealing with the inward implications of this, but there's actually outward implications of this. Let me tell you what I mean by that. He says Jesus Christ might display his perfect patience as an example to those who were to believe in him for eternal life. And so the gospel actually doesn't just make us clean and pull us out of our sin. It actually, when it is lived out, it displays something of who Jesus is and what he's like to people looking onward. Listen, people ought to look at our lives and see Jesus' patience, his perfect patience on display. Think about what that means. What would it mean to treat sinners with the patience that Jesus treated you with? What would it mean for the church to actually approach people walking in sin with the type of love that Jesus actually did? This is what Paul is calling him to. Our world is increasingly impatient. We get food through delivery. We get entertainment through Netflix and information through Google in an instant. And yet there's something about Christians that ought to demonstrate to a watching world what patience is like. Jesus is patient with sinners like you and me. And when people see that on display, it says that they'll see that example and they will believe in him for eternal life. The church ought to aim at love. And the way that looks is they'll see Jesus' perfect patience on display in our lives. And when we do that, others will believe and come to know Jesus for eternal life.